Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and today we're taking a look at some of the best American-made fixed blades that you can get right now for under $100. Let's check them out. So obviously there are a lot of great deals out there in the kind of knife enthusiast sphere these days, but a lot of the American stuff tends to carry a little bit more of a price premium. But there are still some good things, some very good things in fact, that you can get for less than $100. And we're gonna go through an alphabetical order of the stuff I've picked out here, not playing favorites or anything like that. So we're gonna start with a Becker, the BK18, one of the mid-sized fixed blades in the Becker lineup. You can still get a couple of the full-sizers just under $100. But for me, I think under $100, the BK18 is exactly the place you should be looking because it combines a lot of great things into one smaller fixed blade. $90 or so, about 4.5 inches on the blade length. 1095 Crowvan carbon steel, coated of course to help prevent corrosion. And the blade shape itself combines a lot of great things of essentially all three of the mid-size Beckers that have been out so far. You've got the clip point BK17, the trailing point BK15, and of course the BK16, which is still in production with the standard drop point. This knife can kind of cover all of the ground that those knives covered. You certainly have plenty of belly here for slicing, whether you're doing hunting or food prep. And you've also got a very acute point, like the old clip point did. If you needed to press this into a tactical roll, you could certainly do that as well, quite easily in fact. The handles are injection molded and bolted on. The card is available as an upgrade, but that's going to cost you a bit more. And as long as you don't have super big hands, these tend to be very comfortable to hold. They're swelled and contoured exactly right to be phenomenal in all kinds of different grips that you're going to need. The sheath itself is really nice too, and definitely a bit of an upgrade over the BK16, for example. It's hard plastic, it clicks in like Kydex. You've got a very sturdy construction. You do have a belt loop here at the back, and you could reverse this to either side, so you can carry it left or right, no problem. You can use your standard tech locks, large or small. Lots of different lashing options available if you want to do something up a little different still. And super, super solid. In addition to that, thanks to the milled slots here and kind of the wide, flat patch of material, the thing that Ethan Becker himself likes to recommend is you can actually lash a small survival kit or little doohickeys there right on the front because it's a great platform for doing that sort of thing as well. So while this Becker can handle all kinds of different roles, camping, combat, general utility, this next guy is definitively a tactical knife, and that is the Benchmade SOCP Dagger. Comes in about $98, and you've got a 3¼ inch blade here, 440C, double-edged, and pure tactical, as you can see. The black coating here is not necessarily for corrosion resistance, since you already have a stainless steel, but more to keep it low profile and keep the reflections down. Now the feel is super solid in the hand, certainly a benefit of the single piece construction right here, and the grip is going to work very well thanks to especially that retention ring at the back that makes sure it's not going to slip in either direction when you are utilizing the blade. The sheath is just as low profile as the knife itself. Hard plastic again, molded, but this is essentially, well, I almost said it's essentially a pocket fixed blade because of the pocket clip here. You can slip it into your front pocket, no problem. It's also set up to work very well inside the waistband. Very concealable, very low profile until you need it, and then pretty easy to access because you can get in there with your hand, grab that finger ring with your index finger, and you can pull the knife right out. It's right in the perfect position to use this in a tactical encounter, or certainly a strong utility blade if you need it for that as well. Very acute point is going to cut or going to pierce quite nicely, and with that double edge, you've got a lot of edge to work with. All right, next up we're going to come to buck knives, and this was actually a hard one to narrow down because I think the 119 Special is a pretty obvious answer, but I went with the Vanguard instead. Primary reason, for most people, this is actually going to be a more comfortable handle through most tasks, whether it's hunting, which of course buck has a very strong heritage with, or utility or outdoor uses. And the Vanguard is a more elegant feeling design as well. You've got some really nice lines, great feel in the hand, like I mentioned, a little more versatile in the terms of the different grips that you can use with this knife, and different versions of this knife are available. This one right here is one of the slightly more expensive versions, comes in just under $100, and that comes with a walnut handle. Tang is embedded in the handle. This is not a full tang design, but you have a very smooth and ergonomic handle as a result. Blade steel is Buck's 420HC, hollow ground, about 4¼ inches, classic drop point shape. And this has got hunting knife written all over it, kind of like I mentioned before. Hollow ground, it's got a good sweep to the profile. A little bit of an area you can choke up in front of the finger guard a little bit, as long as your fingers aren't too large. Not gonna be like a bushcrafter or that sort of thing, but this would make a good camp knife, provided you didn't want to use it for like hours of whittling and carving. May not be the best for that, but for all kinds of other general utility, this is going to be fantastic. Now the sheath is kind of a classic shape, classic pattern for some of these knives. You've got a retention strap with a snap that kind of loops around the back of the knife, or the knuckle side of the knife, and uses the index finger guard as its kind of retention point there, and you've got a standard belt loop on the back. Honorable mention for Buck is the Pursuit series. And I think the reason, before I get into this knife briefly, the reason I didn't pick this over the Vanguard is I think the Vanguard feels just a bit more classic. It's certainly durable. And I think for most folks, the handle here, again, comfort is going to be a big factor on this knife. It feels really good. It also has a history of success, whereas the Pursuit series is relatively new, but it is pretty darn good. Now the other reason is there are two tiers on this Pursuit series. There's the Standard, which has a 420HC blade, and the Pro with an upgraded S35 VN blade. But the full size there is over the $100 mark, so that kind of swayed me a little bit as well. But you can still get the small the small Pursuit Pro for about $90. S35 VN steel, 3¾ inch long, built for kind of smaller to medium-sized hands, I would say. Another fine hunting / utility / camp knife for sure. And if you want that rubberized grip as well, you got some finger guards here. There actually is a Vanguard version that has a rubber grip as well, but really cool options to look at, and available as a folder version as well. All right, next up is kind of another classic hunting knife, and you're gonna see on a lot of the best American designs in this price range, they're gonna skew either hunting or tactical. There's a few that are kind of in between, but those seem to be kind of the overriding themes, and Case's fixed blade hunting series is no exception. Classic stacked leather American style hunting knife here. This is the 5-inch version that comes in about $80. The blade itself is Case's True Sharp stainless with this fine mirror polish and a hollow grind. Very, very nice sweeping profile for longer cuts or skinning hunting. Even some food prep, even though the hollow grind might not be the best for something like that, but it does have a good shape as well. Handles themselves, again, this one just like the previous knife, maybe built for smaller to medium-sized hands. My hands are a little slightly larger than average, and they're a bit tight. Can certainly make it work, but I'm definitely not inside of the finger guard and butt cap right there. There's some other versions of this knife out there with different blade styles. There's a fillet knife and some other different hunting shapes that are also worth a good look, because there's just something oh so classic and satisfying about these, especially when they only cost what they do. Sheath, like the Buck Vanguard, simple leather with the wraparound strap that holds on to the index finger guard and carries nice and securely. All right, next up is an ESEE, and I gotta give it to the Izula II. Over the standard Izula version, and the reason being, for just under $90, in addition to getting a longer handle than the Izula, you also get the micarta handle scales included in the package. So it's a little bit of a better value, I tend to think, and the feel in the hand is quite excellent for such a small fixed blade, which could still be used as a neck knife as well, just like the standard Izula, with the scales on, or you could take them off if you wish, if you want a flatter carry. But I really like the Izula II. It was actually my first ESEE that I ever bought. Works incredibly well as a small companion fixed blade in the outdoors or as an EDC for sure. You've got 1095 steel here, coated to prevent corrosion again. And the party trick to this knife is kind of the slight downward curve they give the handle, because it allows the blade itself to have a very large belly, but the tip is down enough along the center line you can use it quite effectively. You can still pierce without trying to have to reach for that tip, like you might have to do with something like that case knife with a kind of upswept or trailing point tip. The construction of the Izula is also rock solid and backed, of course, by ESEE's lifetime, no questions asked warranty. Solid piece of investment right here for a lifetime of use for sure. As for the sheath, it is hard plastic. The knife clicks in quite easily. It does come with a belt clip, but then a large tech lock would work if you wanted something a little more robust. ESEE's always been really good about making sure their sheaths are compatible with some of those aftermarket solutions. And that's just one of the things we really appreciate about what they do. All right, now we come to Gerber, which deserves a lot of credit, I think, for trying to bring a lot of their production back to the States. They'd offshored a lot for a while, but there are more USA-made Gerbers now than there have been in, let's say, about 10 years ago, for example. Now, this particular knife never left the United States. It's still being made here, and it's a perfect example of what Gerber can do. This is the Gerber LMF II, coming in about $99 right now. Now, you'll see this often on a short list of some of the best combat/survival knives out there. Combat knife all the way. We've got about a 5-inch blade, 420HC steel here, flat grind with the partial serrations here at the back. Now, the serrations here are actually very important for the original intended mission of this knife, which was actually as an aircrew issued knife, something that they'd be able to help them escape from the cockpit if they were down behind enemy lines or that sort of thing. Because of those serrations, it'll be a little more easy for them to kind of saw through like aluminum panels and that sort of thing that they might need to do in that sort of situation. And you're going to see another feature to back up that as well, which is useful for like demolition crews and other folks as well that might be dealing with some live electrical wires. The tang itself stops inside the molded handle. It doesn't actually connect to the metal striking plate or the metal striking point here at the back. So it is actually electrically insulated, the blade from the handle and from the back end here. So if aircrew was kind of sawing through the bit of fuselage there and hit a live wire, hopefully it's not going to charge through the person, which would be a bit of a problem. Not quite sure how much juice it's rated to handle though, so don't go around just cutting live wires with this. Would not recommend, but it is still solid with that construction there. The other advantage you get with that striking plate or striking point there at the bottom is you get a little bit of shock absorption since it's not connected to the tang of the knife itself. You've got a little bit of a rubbery texture here, so you've got a tiny little bit of give that's going to help with those strikes. You've also got a pair of lanyard holes here at the front, as well as a single one at the back. And this is where a lot of times you'll talk about lashing a knife to a stick in a survival scenario. And more than anything else, at least is the way I've kind of learned about it over the years, this can be really helpful, again, for aircrew people. If they've had to parachute out of their aircraft and land in jungle in thick vegetation, maybe their pack or part of their parachute is stuck up in a tree, and this might be the only way they could reach it to kind of cut it down and get to the rest of their life-saving gear. The sheath itself on this knife is very heavy duty. Clicks in very positively, heavy duty webbing on the back, multiple retention straps, and even with the knife and the webbing out of the way, we've actually got a carbide knife sharpener here in the sheath, which can help you keep a rudimentary edge in the field as you're going about your business. Now, because it shares so much of its DNA very closely with the LMF II, I had to give an honorable mention now to the StrongArm. A little bit smaller overall. Blade length is about the same, actually. Comes in right at about 5 inches, but it's a little narrower. The handle is, of course, a little bit shorter, but you can definitely see the family resemblance here. And I think for a lot of people, the StrongArm might be a little more useful day to day. First and foremost, you can get it without the partial serrations, which a lot of folks are going to prefer. It's also a little bit less expensive, about 75 bucks. You save, it's about a quarter off of the full-size LMF II right there. What you don't get is the electrically insulated handle, but again, for most folks, not really going to make a difference. And for me at least, the handle itself feels a little more natural than the larger LMF II, but it is a little bit smaller, as you can see. If I were wearing a pair of heavy-duty gloves, it might get a little bit tight for me. Not the case for sure with the LMF. But again, I had to mention the StrongArm, not just for the resemblance, but because it has been proven at this point to be an incredibly tough American-made Gerber. 420HC again, thick enough to stand up to some good abuse, a flat saber grind there, and just super solid as well. While we're talking combat knives, it brings us now to K-Bar, although if technically we started with K-Bar because Becker is made by K-Bar these days, but we have perhaps the most iconic combat knife ever issued, and that is the USMC Fighter from K-Bar, originally known, of course, as the Mark II back in World War II when it was first produced. But nowadays they can be had right now, made in New York, for about 88 bucks. Now, one of the cool bits of lore surrounding the genesis of this knife is it's kind of a upscaled, lengthened, beefed up version of a lot of the hunting knives that the American GIs would have been more familiar with at the time. And you can kind of see that in the case that we already showed a little bit earlier. You've got a meteor handle, longer blade here. Obviously, we don't have the trailing point, but there were some clip point versions of these hunting knives essentially back in the day. You've got a longer, stronger, beefier version here that is ready to serve. Steel is 1095 CV, as K-Bar is fond of using. Stacked leather handle, again, we've got some extra grooves for more grip, and a nice oval cross section, so it's going to index and nest into the hand quite nicely. As you can see, I've got plenty of handle length as well, even if I am wearing gloves. We've also got a standard crossguard here, a little bit on the smaller side so it doesn't get in the way too much, but it does offer you a bit of hand protection, and overall a pretty nimble feel in the hand for, a 7-inch carbon steel blade. Speaking of the kind of Becker and K-Bar connection, I'll mention a story that Ethan Becker told me about this particular knife at one point. In his opinion, at least, in terms of knives, actual knives that have been issued to armies and militaries over the years, apart from, we're not talking like special operations that might carry some very specialized stuff, but in terms of general issued knives, he thinks that the Mark II is probably the best combat knife that has ever been issued to any standing army in the world. That's high praise for sure, and we'll end, of course, on the sheath, as we've been doing. Another classic leather pattern here with a retention strap around the handle rather than around the crossguard. All right, next up we come to Ontario, and I've got two from them, and unlike other brands where I've shown two, one of them is not an honorable mention. Ontario actually has two separate series that represent something very good, and that is an incredible value for what you're getting. So standing in here to represent the Spec Plus series is the SP15. And I went with this particular one for this video because it offers a little bit of a different combat knife option than some of the stuff we've looked at so far. Bit of a riff on the Fairbairn Sykes Dagger, essentially. Of course, it's not an identical reproduction for sure, but you get a little bit of that capability for only about 56 bucks right now. Blade itself is a nice, tough carbon steel like you'd expect. 1075 these days, which doesn't hold an edge quite as long as 1095, but it is a little bit tougher, which on a budget knife like this, it's going to mean you're even less afraid to kind of wail and beat on it as you would with a different steel. Now we've got single edged here on the leading standard edge. The tip on the reverse side is not sharpened, but you do have the rest of the length with some big sharpened serrations that are going to work really well on rope, webbing, clothing, any kind of fibrous material for sure. Blade length is about 6 1/4, so plenty of reach, and we've got an overmolded handle on top of the tang for some good grip. Echoes a little bit the stacked leather kind of construction with the grooves, but just in the injection molded format. And then you've got a butt plate here on the bottom for some hammering as well. Really durable tools. I myself have used one of the SP5s, the big 10-inch long, 1/4-inch thick buoys in this series. Also around 55 bucks and incredibly tough for all kinds of heavier uses. Sheath is relatively simple, as you'd expect to kind of help keep the price down. It's a nice ambidextrous design, or a nice solution to an ambidextrous use. You've got a single retention strap here around the handle, and then you've got a loop that's going to loop over the finger guard. But the cool thing about that loop is you can rotate it to either side. So you can set this up either side of the body or just whichever piece of the crossguard you want to use for your retention. On the back, you've got a belt loop here at the top and some MOLLE webbing at the along the rest of it so that you can attach it to your tactical gear very easily. Next up, here to represent the Rat series of fixed blades is the Rat 7, which comes in about $87 right now. And before the guys who went on to form ESEE, they had licensed their knives to Ontario. And even though they've gone their separate ways now, Ontario is still able to produce their original designs that they had earlier. And while the ESEEs definitely have the edge in fit and finish, I would say, you can still get a little bit of a better price on the Ontarios if that's not a huge deal to you. And the Rat 7 here is the one I picked because there's no perfect analog in the ESEE lineup right now. Again, tough carbon steel. We're about 3/16 of an inch thick, about 7 inches long, full flat grind, and it has just a great all-around shape for a larger fixed blade that isn't going to be a chopper. There are chopper versions in the lineup. This guy is a little more nimble, so you've got a long slice and you've got a long amount of reach if you're going to use this in sort of the crossover role that the adventure team originally intended, which is survival and actual tactical use. The handles themselves are micarta, a little bit on the blockier side, but they do fill the hand quite nicely. And there is enough meat there if you wanted to mod it a little bit, put a little bit of shaping on it yourself, you certainly could do that. But the materials for the price alone are definitely worthy of note. The sheath is essentially the same as we just saw on the Spec Plus knife, just sized for this particular blade shape. But this is another knife that is going to work really well for a broad range of people. If you need a larger fixed blade for utility use, let's say maybe a farm knife, that sort of thing. If you want a larger camp knife that you can split wood with as well as pull some nice long slices with, or you need something with slightly more offensive capabilities, really good option for just about everything. And last but not least, we come to tops with the only real bushcraft knife from America under $100 on the list today, and that is a smaller version of one of their all-time classics. This is the Fieldcraft 3.5, sneaking right under that $100 mark. Now, funnily enough, even though it is called the 3.5, the blade length itself is more like 3.75, which is cool. You get a little bit of extra length without feeling that much bigger. 1095 carbon steel is here as well, a bit over 1/8 of an inch thick with the coating, and you have Topps' Scandi Vex grind, which is sort of a hybrid between a Scandi and a true convex. Leans definitely more towards the Scandi side of things, and as such, is going to be a great profile for doing things like woodwork, whittling, carving, all of the bushcraft stuff that you'd need your fixed blade part of your tool complement to do. The handle itself is micarta, and despite being significantly smaller than the full-size bob, which the Brothers of Bushcraft knife, the full-size, is also known as, still fills the hand fairly well. I could certainly maybe do with a little more girth, but I actually don't feel like I'm really lacking there, even though that might be my preference otherwise. Pretty nicely done. And you got a nice little bit of red liner as an accent, which is pretty cool. And then each side of the knife has a bow drill divot. So if you wanted to use the knife as the bearing block for a friction fire that you're working on, you could do that. Probably not something you're going to do all the time, but that would be one less thing you'd have to look for and scavenge and improvise in the wild if you did need it. Now, of course, if you're going to do that, make sure, please, to sheathe your knife before you do it, just for safety's sake. It gives me a chance to talk about the sheath now, which is Kydex, finished exceptionally well. Comes with a belt clip on the back, which can actually be rotated, so you can carry it at a particular orientation you might like. You could also take that off and use a small tech lock on these if you wanted another option. But no matter how you carry it, you're definitely going to be impressed and served very well by the solid construction and fit and finish that Topps offers right here. All right, that's it for our list of best USA-made fixed blades under $100 right now. I will say one more thing. The White River Backpacker definitely deserves to be on this list, and it only didn't because we did not have one on the shelf on filming day, which is a shame because that is also a phenomenal neck knife. One of my favorites, in fact, and you should definitely check it out. But that's it for today. Let me know what you thought of my picks in the comments below. And if you want to get your hands on any of these guys, we'll leave links in the description as always to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. Make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program as well, because if you're going to put your money down on one of these American-made fixed blades, or any other blade for that matter, you might as well earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.